Connecting to the cloud, beginning to record, going on Facebook Live. Welcome, Marcus. Awesome to have you with us today. We're going to let people kind of get into the room and settle in, and we're going to turn it over to you pretty quickly because I know it's like watching a jackrabbit run across a field in the middle of the day. You're very, very quick. Make sure we give you all of the time because you're going to fill it all up with a lot of knowledge. So get ready for energy to come to the screen in a big, big way. Let's see if Kristen was on here. Is she on here yet? Leah, you see Kristen yet? Not yet. So as folks are coming in, we are recording this, so there will be a recording. There'll be a recap sent out at the end of this webinar, and it will be on the website for additional consumption with anyone that wants to go kind of grab something that they may have missed. Kristen McLean should be popping on with us any second. She's going to do a drawing for us, so we'll have like a nice little visual that comes out of this as well. And if you get an opportunity to visit her website, it's the vividinkcompany.com. So all those meetings that you go to or used to go to and you saw them drawing it, now we're doing it in the virtual world, and she can bounce in and do those in any meetings that you have. So let me get to Marcus. I want to give him a quick introduction. Named one of 20 speakers you do not want to miss by Forbes magazine. Marcus has also been called the web marketing guru by the New York Times. These are big names, man. Nice job. And then his book, They Ask You Answer, which I'm sure you'll reference many, many times in here. And Leah, if we could put the link in chat, that would be awesome. Rated the #1 marketing book to read in 2017 by Mashable. So really good insight. And I know that's kind of the cornerstone of everything that you've done, both in your pool business as well as in the marketing company as well. So you'll talk a lot about that. Really, really good content. And then you're doing a bunch of keynotes all over the place. You used to do 70 plus a year. I'm assuming that was from a stage from the war room that you're in right now. So super happy to have you with us today and to share some of this information. He's going to teach us how to create a world-class virtual sales experience for buyers, specifically over video for any product or any service. So we've gone to that switch from having salespeople meeting in cities with people face-to-face, belly-to-belly, and this whole virtual space has put a new twist on it, and we need to get really, really good at it. So again, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take us through, what does it look like to be virtual in this new world with sales and marketing?
All right, Andy. Thanks, buddy. Real quick, everyone. I'm the type of person that just likes it when you ask your questions real time as you have them, and you're not going to interrupt me. So I've given Andy the green light to, if he sees a question come through that feels would apply to the group, he'll stop me and he'll just go ahead and say, hey, Marcus, we got a question here. So don't hesitate to ask. We are going to have also an extended time at the end to address some of those questions. So start thinking about those now. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It will be a bit fast and furious. Let's jump right into it. My quick background, I used to be a pool guy. In fact, I still own a swimming pool company specialized in fiberglass pools. The company is called River Pools and Spas. We almost lost this company in 2008 because of the economy. And that was, what was funny is because of the crash of 2008, it forced me to do a bunch of things that I didn't really realize were innovative. And we ended up, because of these actions that we took, we ended up becoming the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And then we grew what was the largest or the fastest growing fiberglass pool manufacturing company in the world. And recently that was acquired, but it's been an amazing ride. And I still own the original company called River Pools, which installs pools in Virginia. Also own another marketing agency called Impact as well. Now, all that we are talking about today, at least most of it, you can find in They Ask You Answer the book. This has now been embraced by literally thousands of companies all over the world. And it's really fundamentally focused on obsessing with the way buyers think and the questions they ask and the fears they have and the way they want to buy, the way they want to learn. And so much of what we're going to be talking about today is the way they want to buy, the way they want to learn, which is a virtual based mindset. And so that's what we're going to lean into. And I want to start with, whenever there's hardship, we see opportunities. You see it from a sales standpoint, you see it from a marketing standpoint. And it's interesting, the opportunities that came for me and let's say my swimming pool company, and hopefully you've seen some opportunities since COVID as well. So let me give you an example. For years, when we were selling swimming pools, somebody would call us up and say, hey, I'd like to get a quote for a swimming pool. And we'd say, sure, we'll come out to your house and we'll give you a quote. And that this way went for about 20 years since we started this right out of college for me in 2001. And so then the last few years, I told my sales team, you know what, I think we could be selling over video. And everybody said to me, Marcus, I don't think we can sell over video because we have to see their yard. And I'm like, yeah, but I still think we could sell over video if we wanted to. And I'm like, no, we got to see the yard, got to get to the kitchen table. That's what we got to do. And I said, I just don't know if I'm picking up what you're putting down, but they didn't do it. And COVID suddenly appears. And then, wow, we all want to now have video sales calls. And what's interesting is suddenly, instead of saying all the reasons why it wouldn't work, we started thinking about all the reasons why it could work. And so we add this little bitty element to the form on our contact page on our website, which is like a virtual sales experience. And it was so fascinating what happened. Now, here's the thing though. First thing we did with the sales team is said, okay, now that we're living in the solution, what can we do in order to overcome the problems that we traditionally have had doing it over video, or would have if we did it over video? They're like, well, we got to see the yard. Okay, what can we do to see the yard? We created a video that taught homeowners how to take photos of their front yard, their side yard, and their backyard. And now, before we even meet with them on video, we've seen everything essentially what we would have seen. And what's really interesting is the customer is actually more invested in doing business with us because we've asked them to do more on the front end. To make a long story very short, the sales team immediately fell in love with virtual sales appointments. At most, before, we could do 2 sales appointments in a day, at most. Today, on average, we can do about 6 if we're trying. 6, and eat dinner with our family that night, which is pretty powerful. Closing rates have actually gone up. We'll talk about that a little bit. And everybody is saying the same thing. And I do not exaggerate when I say this. Everybody's saying, we wouldn't go back to the way we were doing it before. And so the question is why. I want to talk about that. Quick definition of virtual selling. It's a process of using technology, specifically video, to show it, whatever it is, process, product, methodology, brand, better, with the result being more personalized relationships, shorter sales cycles, and more business won. That's what's possible if we play this the right way, if we do it the right way. So let's dispel the myths really fast, because there's a bunch of crazy myths out there when it comes to selling over video. Many sales teams, especially the old schoolers, have. We just need to get past these quickly. I'll be frank, these drive me a little bit crazy, but we need to address them anyway. First myth, which is completely not the case, and I've now seen this having done virtual sales training for many sales teams since COVID started, and that is virtual selling closing rates will always be lower because you're not meeting in person. This is what they say. Why is it not true? Well, here's what's interesting. Studies have consistently shown over the years, pre-COVID, certainly after, that the number one factor that dictates who a prospect does business with is the company they actually have a conversation with first. In other words, studies show that 70% of the time, the prospect will go with the company that they talked to first, not reached out to first, talked to first. Prospect reaches out to 3 companies. 3 companies send an email response saying, we'll get back to you. One of those companies, though, immediately talks to the prospect. They're going to win the business 70% of the time. Every one of your buyers and mine have become dramatically more impatient, certainly since the digital age began roughly 20 years ago. And so the key here is that we can be dramatically faster to meet and talk with a prospect when we do it over video. Sales teams must understand this. And this is one of the major game changers in terms of the mindsets that sales teams in general need to have. Number 2, people are saying, well, video sales, video conferencing, it's not face-to-face selling. Never quite understood that one. Andy can see me right now. I can see him.
I mean,
yeah.
That's all we got is these two faces right now.
That's it. This is as face-to-face as it gets. Now, granted, you can't necessarily see the rest of me. He doesn't know if I'm short or tall or 5'11 and a half, which is what I am. But this is a face-to-face sales experience. When you are teaching your sales team about using video to sell, make sure you describe it as face-to-face selling that just happens to be over video. Certainly there is in-person selling, but there is two types of face-to-face selling: when you meet in person and then when you meet over video. They are both face-to-face. Number three, but we're in a relationship-based business. Maybe one of my favorites too. Interesting, right? I guess it was about 30 days after COVID, when everybody was scrambling around. I had a CEO of a financial wellness company contact me and said, Marcus, I've come to this amazing realization. All of our sales team is essentially saying the same thing, which is we realize now that we don't have to meet with prospects on a golf course in order to close deals. Isn't that funny? Now, here's the thing that's interesting about relationship-based is when you start to do more video sales calls, and a bunch of the teams I've trained now have started to see this and say this, you end up having more touches with the prospect because you're not trying to coordinate travel schedules like you previously were. And so instead of seeing that customer or that prospect once every 6 months or quarter, now if you want to meet with them once every 6 weeks, you can do it easily. And it's simple to schedule that 30-minute block on your calendar where you're seeing each other face to face. People fall in love online. You can certainly build relationships online. This is absolutely conducive to being in a relationship-based business. And then finally, classic myth, but our customers just aren't ready for it. I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care if it's white collar or blue collar. There's been two major tipping points to this. First major tipping point, of course, is the fact that if you have kids, they've probably been going to school on Zoom, and therefore you've had to learn Zoom, and kids all over the world and their parents have had to learn Zoom and video conferencing platforms over the last 8 months. Second factor to this is, so that takes care of the younger generation and the, let's say, parent generation. Now, think about the elderly for a second. What have the elderly had to do during this process? Well, most doctors' offices that never would have been doing telemedicine or video conferencing with the doctor, because I live in the sticks in Virginia. There is one doctor's office in my county. They never would have done telemedicine. They certainly never would have had me meet with the doctor over video. They're doing it today. And guess what? All their patients have had to learn the same thing. So these 70, 80-year-olds are doing the same thing. They're learning the same process. We have literally leapt ahead 10 years in terms of the way that we do video and video conferencing in the course of 8 months. I'm not exaggerating. This is the reality of where it is. And so that's where we are today. That's where we are today. So those are the myths. Now, here's one thing that we found, though. Just because somebody sells well doesn't mean they necessarily sell well over video, because there are intricacies that are not being taught to sales teams. And so if you want your sales team to be great, let's make sure that we focus on training them the little things that'll make a big difference. So as we have this virtual conversation today, I'm going to focus first on sales, and we're going to look at video sales calls right now. It's going to be extremely helpful. It's going to be real fast because I can't give it to you all in the, to do it in depth, we can't. But I'm going to brush over these virtual sales calls best practices. And then we're going to shift over to marketing after that. And we're going to talk about how you can enhance dramatically your website. So whether you're in sales or marketing, I can promise you're going to get a lot of value out of the things we're getting ready to talk about, especially if you're open-minded, open heart with respect to things that you haven't necessarily done before, but you're saying, is it possible that we do that thing?
Marcus,
So, yes, please, Andy.
Just pile onto this a bit. The paying attention to what's being delivered here. It's not I'll just wait this out and we're going to go back to the way we used to do things. The way we're doing things now will be the way we do things in the future. So it's like, hey, we got to, whether you like it or not, change is going to happen. So let's just get on with the change.
Yeah. And that's the best business owners and leaders don't spend all day resisting the rising tide. They move their lounge chair up the beach and they keep going. It's what we do. And so let's look at these best practices, folks. It's all these things that I'm getting ready to say. You might say, these are very obvious. And I can tell you right now, I've got 11 listed on the board. If you really did a study on your sales team, if they're doing video sales call, you will find that they do less than 50% of these consistently. Let me talk about a few of the ones that are of most importance. Studies show that when both parties turn their camera on with video sales call, the closing rates are dramatically higher. No shocker there, because everybody that's listening to this has been on a video call where the other person didn't have their camera on. And of course, how's that experience? Well, it probably sucked. It sucked because you have no idea what they're doing. They're clearly not as invested in you as you are in them. And because of that, we have discommunication, right? So the key is you teach your sales team how to help somebody turn the camera on every single time. In order to do this, you need to help them understand two parts to this. Number one, explain the why. Number two, get the confirmation. So I'm going to show you an example of this really quickly. Because this is recorded, you can actually take this script and run back with your sales team, which is really simple. Andy's going to be my customer. He doesn't have much to do other than smile and look handsome, which he does a very good job at. And so he's going to be my customer. We're going to pretend that I'm setting up a virtual sales call. I need to make sure, a video sales call. I want to make sure that he turns his camera on. But you notice that I'm going to explain the why very clearly, and then I'm going to get the confirmation. This is what you really want to teach your team how to do. Otherwise, you're going to see many of their calls. The person's not going to have their camera on, and closing rates are going to suffer because of it. So it might look something like this. So Andy, let's just pretend you're buying a pool, because everybody should have a pool, Andy. So Andy, so when we meet this Friday, I'm going to send you a Zoom invite. Now, it's important that we both have our cameras on. Now, the reason why we need to have our cameras on is because you need to be able to see me, get to know me. We're going to be friends for a long time. At the same time, I need to be able to see you. You see, I'm going to be explaining some complicated things when we're on the call. I need to be able to see if you're getting everything that I'm explaining. And if you're not, I need to be able to say it better. This will prevent us from making any mistakes. So Andy, will you make sure to have your camera turned on for our appointment on Friday?
Yeah,
Now,
that makes total sense. I'll make sure.
yeah. And so it's very, very just, oh, that's an obvious yes at that point. But if you don't explain the whys, then you might get pushback. Okay. There's other mistakes that we consistently see people making all the time. Let me give you an example of one that you wouldn't necessarily think of. When you have a group of decision makers on a video sales call, you do not ask questions open to the group. In other words, when you ask a question that's open to the group, what you get oftentimes are attendees looking at each other saying, who's going to go first? The great communicators, especially online, when it comes to a virtual sales call, they realize they are the chorister, the band director. So when there's a question, they say, so Andy, what are your thoughts on this? Mike, what would you add to that? Jenny, is there anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation? You're very intentional with the flow of the conversation by using names. And by doing this also, you ensure that everybody participates in said conversation. And instead of the alpha taking over and everybody else just falling by the wayside, now everybody is involved in the call. Everybody feels important. You build trust with everybody, and you are guiding that call so that the flow is exceptional and there is no wasted time. And so make sure that you check with each one of your team members. Find out, are we doing the things that are mentioned on the board? Like I said, I wish we had more time to talk about it. We don't. But again, if you do not practice this with your sales team and assume that just because they're good at sales, they're going to be great at selling on video, there's a good chance that your closing rates are going to go down when they actually should, in most cases, be going up. All right. So let's talk about another virtual sales opportunity that everybody should be doing right now, and certainly training our sales teams with right now. And that has to do with email. Now, email has become a little bit crazy over the last 8 months. Andy, is your inbox more flooded than it's ever been over the last 8 months?
Yes, with people whom I do not know asking me to purchase their stuff, and then coming back 4 days later and saying, "Hey, this will be the last email you get from me."
I promise. Yes, yes. For some reason, I didn't hear from you, Andy. So if we're going to stand out in a world flooded of busy inboxes, there's certain things that we have to do. I've met with sales teams all over the world. I've never found a single sales team that had been trained on how to write a subject line on a one-to-one email. Think about that for a second. The average open rate for emails from a salesperson to a prospect or a customer, they've done the studies, 18%. Your sales team right now sends out maybe on average 100 emails a week. Let's just say it could be a month, could be a week. 18 out of 100 get opened, 82 do not get opened. And the biggest reason is poor subject lines, yet none of them have been trained. It's an atrocity if you think about it. And so if you give them just the simple tricks and tips, suddenly they start getting open rates. Let me give an example of this. There's 3 fundamental best practices that you should be teaching any of your team members that are sending out consistently emails to prospects or customers. Number 1, keep in mind, average open rate, 18%, right? So number 1, if you include the person's name, and I'm not saying in a cheesy, spammy way, in a natural way, if you include the person's name, you're going to get a lift of 10%. Okay, so now you're up to roughly 30% open rate. If you include the word video in the subject line, you're going to get a lift of another 10% or more. So now you're up at 40% plus. And then finally, if you include something personalized that is specific to that individual, that industry, that company, a problem that they have, a specific need that they have. No, not about you and your stuff and why you're awesome. A specific need that they have, something they were asking about. Now you're going to see another lift of 20+%. And so an example, hi Jen, your commercial insurance issues. All right. So let's say Jen had mentioned she had some issues. Now we've got all the 3 best practices right there. That's just one simple example. What's so profound to me though, is that sales teams have not been taught this. And as soon as you start to teach them this, they start to see better results. Most sales teams do not know the average open rates for their emails, for their teams. Most don't know it. And if you knew yours, you would probably say what I just talked about was way more important than you might realize. This is extremely important. But then what do we do with the body of the email? How can we humanize that? How can we personalize that? If you are not at this point sending consistently video-based emails, especially if it requires a longer answer to a question, then there's a good chance that you're being left behind. If you want to stand out, if you want to make sure somebody actually consumes the thing, the message. If I had met with Jen a few days ago and then I sent this to Jen, Jen knows me, what is the chance that she watches this video? It's probably roughly 100%, right? She is going to watch this. You know what's interesting, Andy? I have used this with gatekeepers, with leaders of organizations, not in a cheesy way, but in my particular way, my particular style. And it's amazing how often I say, that was a really special touch. Nobody's ever done that for me before. The fact that you sent a personalized video, that was really, really cool. And it's not hard to teach your sales team how to use this type of tool so that instead of sending a long diatribe via text, that, by the way, talk about efficiencies, the average person talks 3 times faster than they type. I would argue for a lot of salespeople, it's probably a 5-to-1 ratio. And so if you're thinking about it, this is dramatically more efficient. And so you can be more efficient and you don't have to go back and correct all your grammar or spelling errors. You can just be yourself, which is what most people are great at doing, being themselves, talking in front of a prospect. We need to teach our sales teams how to be great with sending one-to-one videos. Simplest tool I've seen for this, Vidyard. Okay, Vidyard. Vidyard is free. It costs you nothing. All you have to do is add it as a Chrome extension. So if you use Chrome as your browser, which you should because it's the year 2020, right? So use Chrome and add it as an extension on your browser. I'm telling you, it's incredibly simple. It takes very little training for your sales team. It's free and it's very, very powerful. Make sure to start doing that. Okay. Now, that was sales. I know.
You did that. You did that video with Vern and I when we just first started talking about including.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So that was exactly what you did. So one of the things is, you do yourself the things that you're talking about other people doing here, which is important.
I'm eating that dog food, Andy.
You have to, man.
Got to eat that dog food. All right. So let's talk about your website. And this is going to be quite fascinating for some of you. This is going to push what you believe to be true. That means it's good, because if we came here and sung kumbaya, we wouldn't get anything accomplished. And so if this is challenging what you might think you should be doing, it means we're probably in the right direction. And this will probably challenge what you think you should be doing with your website. But if we focus on what does the buyer want and what would I want if I was the buyer, if I was the customer, generally it answers our questions. Does anybody remember these books? Andy, do you remember these books back in the day?
No.
Choose Your Own Adventure books. They were great. I always died, but there was something cool about these books. These books were cool because you had choice. You could choose your destiny. And because you were actively engaged in choosing how the book ended, it was more exciting for you. Now, how does that apply to business today? Because today's buyer would prefer if they had a choice, a choose your own adventure. In other words, there was a recent study, and I don't know if you've heard this study, Andy, but it's one of the more profound ones that I've heard in a while. And everybody listen to this for a second. They found that, and this is Gartner. Okay, Gartner came out with this 2 weeks ago, that we know that 33% of all buyers would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. I'll repeat, 33% of all buyers would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. For millennials, that number is 44%. Now, does this mean we're just going to eliminate salespeople as we know it? No, I don't think we should do that. But if we don't facilitate the sales process much more on the front end during the digital side, when they're vetting you on your website, there's a good chance we're not going to be meeting the demands of the marketplace of today. Hence, choose your own adventure. Now, let's look at this in terms of how it plays out for your site, though. There's 3 examples of this choose your own adventure that I'm going to give you here. I'm going to show you examples for each. These are extremely powerful, and you could do them, and they're going to just flip your industry on its head if you apply them, especially number 2 and number 3. Self-scheduling, self-selection, self-pricing. This is for B2B service-based businesses just as much as it is for any other company. So as you hear this and you're that B2B service-based business where a very customized solution, please do not put yourself in that corner of this does not apply, because I assure you 100% to you it applies even more so if you want to stand out from the marketplace. All right, so let's look at each. Self-scheduling. This is giving your visitors on your site the ability to schedule time with the sales team without actually having to talk with somebody in the company. And you say, okay, let me see the pros and the cons to that. All right, well, let me show you a real life example. This company here is called Yale Appliance. They're one of the great case studies of They Ask You Answer the Book. They have the most trafficked kitchen appliance website in the world right now, getting almost 1 million visitors a month to their website. Okay, so they're not hurting for leads and certainly not hurting for sales. Now, they completely embrace this mindset of what does the buyer want? Is it possible to meet them where they are? So in this case, there's different ways that you can schedule a showroom visit or have a showroom visit with Yale Appliance. A, you can show up. B, you can talk to somebody on the phone. They'll give you a time to come in and meet with a salesperson. Or C, the third one is you can schedule your showroom visit on the website. Now let's look at how this happens, and then we're going to talk about the difference that it makes in terms of impact. It's quite fascinating, okay? Stay with me. It's very, very interesting here. So let's say that you wanted to schedule your own appointment on the website. You click on Get Started. Now, as soon as you do that, you see the sales team. You see their faces. You get to read their bio. And then, depending on who you choose, you select their calendar, you get to see their calendar, and then you get to show up at the time that you have set. Now, what impact does this have on the sales process? Right? Don't take it from me. Let's take it from the CEO of the company. Steve, their CEO, says, our schedule a visit tool is the best thing we do. Close rate is 62% higher and roughly 4,000 in sales per appointment. That's double the average appointment. So just to be clear, everybody, if you call and set the appointment with Yale, your average deal size is $2,000. But if somebody doesn't talk to a person, schedules it themselves with the salesperson they want to work with, now we double it. That's the beauty behind data. Can't argue with it. It just is. It doesn't lie. It just is. And so when we say, yeah, but everybody wants to talk to someone, what they want is to feel like they are in control of the buying process and that they have the tools they need to make informed decisions. Sometimes that means they're talking to somebody. Sometimes it means that they can dictate the process. Oftentimes it's a combination of the two. That's self-scheduling. So anything that you schedule right now with customers, could they start doing it themselves?
So the psychology there, Marcus, is that they feel like they're in control.
That's it. It's completely based on, I chose my salesperson. I chose the time. Nobody pushed anything on me. I am in control right now. And if you ask anybody, if you could be in control of the sales process and have the resources that you need, or have somebody else control the sales process, which would you prefer? Everybody, of course, is oh, I would much rather control it myself, right? And I'm not one of those people that says salespeople are bad. Everybody hates salespeople. No one trusts salespeople. It's not true. There's plenty of people that trust salespeople. There's plenty of great salespeople out there. But if we look at this, this is so simple in what they did, yet the results are inarguable. And it's fascinating too, what happens with this. Let's look at another.
Pretty universally around the different industries I've
Yeah,
seen.
consistently, I've not seen an exception to this. Now, I've seen situations where somebody said, well, it seemed like I was having a hard, like I didn't get as many appointments. And it's because there was a flaw with the way that they set it up. Like Yale's is so friendly, user friendly, that it really eliminates that potential issue. So, somebody asked, how do you ensure people show up for their booked appointment on time? This is one of those things where if you look at, Domino's deals with the same question. How do you know that, somebody's going to want their pizza, right? And not cancel it? Or how do you know this? It's one of those things where, do people occasionally not show up? Yes, but more often than not, the salesperson confirms, and the salesperson's really good. They're going to send out a one-to-one video to confirm that they're meeting with the prospect. Now the prospect has seen their face twice. The difference, though, is now they've heard their voice before they come into the showroom, which makes it even better. Once again, this applies to B2B as much as B2C. One good scheduling tool that I've seen, and I always try to give tools if I've seen success with them, is Acuity. All right, it's not the only one, but it's one that I've seen that's good for self-scheduling. Let's look at self-selection. Another powerful example coming up from this, and self-selection is starting to take over industries. All right. And this is so powerful. And Andy, as I'm doing this one, what I want you to think of, I'm going to put you on the spot. I want you to think of, how would this apply to Petra? All right, how would this apply to Petra? And then I want you to give me your example of what came to mind after I'm done the whole thing. Okay. So self-selection, how does it work? Well, self-selection is essentially the process of giving recommendations as a salesperson would by asking questions as a salesperson would, but doing it on your website without using a salesperson. Okay. And so let's look at an example. This is my daughter. I've got 4 kids, my oldest, Danielle. Before she went to university, she said, Dad, I want to start a business doing bridal makeup. I said, good for you. She said, but I don't have a website. So I need to get a website. I just don't know how to build a website because I don't know code. I said, all right, why don't we go to Wix.com? Wix.com is a place where you can go and build a website without having much code knowledge. So she said, cool. So she opens up her laptop and she's on Wix, and I'm staring over her shoulder looking at this experience. And as soon as I saw the experience, I said, oh my gosh, because as soon as she clicks on get started, this is what she sees on the screen. Now, this is the entire web page that she sees. Notice there's no navigation, there's no sidebar, there's no footer. She sees this one thing, right? Power focus. We want your Wix experience to be perfect for your needs. Answer a few questions to help us get to know you better. Did she click on let's do it? Of course she clicked on let's do it. She's like, rock on, let's do it. And then now, what does she see? First question. I want to create a site for, but what did they do? They changed from third person to first person. Why? Because they want it to feel like it's completely personalized for her. She's owning this experience right now. Choose your own adventure is starting to happen. So she clicks on the type of site that she wants and then adds a sentence like magic. And then she's able to scroll over that and once again, click on what her answer is, and it keeps on adding things. And so right now she's enjoying it. It's going fast. There's no friction. It says to her, hey, Danielle, how about we create a website for you right now? And she's like, that's awesome. And so it says, what specifically type of makeup artist do you want to be? And so she's able to give a specificity, which is what every buyer wants to feel like they're giving you the specifics of their situation. And then it says, okay, does your website need any of the following? She's like, yeah, I want to take bookings and appointments, right? So she clicks on bookings and appointments. She's getting excited. She's starting to see it in her mind. And then it says a really smart question. What's the name of your business, Danielle? This was so smart because what did she not yet have?
The name.
She didn't have a name, and that's right. And they knew if she put a name, all of a sudden, that's right, it gets really real. And so she put a name in. She looked at me like, "Who, Dad? Look what I just did. I put in a name for my business." And so then it says to her, "What's your theme? What's your theme, Danielle?" And she chooses a theme to match the way she wants it to look. And then finally it says, "Okay, we're going to create a homepage for you right now." We are like 6 or 7 minutes into the process. And Danielle went from, I'm just checking out Wix, to suddenly she's going to see her website, And then boom, Natural Beauty by Danielle. Here it is, the first version of your website. She looked at it. She literally smiles at it, smiles back at me and says, "Dad, credit card," just like that. Now, I've always been fascinated with that experience because in her mind, she already owned that website because she had designed it, not somebody else. They just ran through her the questions they would have asked had she called them directly and said, "Hey, I need a website for my bridal makeup business." And so how does this start? It starts right here. What is the best blank for me? In almost every business, there's a choice that somebody's making about what is the best or what is the right blank for me. So for me as a pool guy, it might be, what is the best swimming pool shape and size for my backyard? Now let's look at my marketing agency. All right. It might be, what is the best type of marketing plan for my business? It might be for somebody that's looking at, let's say, a software like HubSpot. What is the right HubSpot package for my business's needs? And then we'd have a series of questions that would eventually allow us through this application that we've developed. And they're not outrageously expensive to develop these, by the way. Okay. I will give you a tool for it in just a second. Would allow us to immediately give them a recommendation. Now, before I come to you, Andy, I'm going to ask everybody that's listening to this, I'm going to ask you a favor, okay? And I'm serious. Everybody participate, where Andy will come after you in the night.
I have all their names. So
That's right. I know you do. And here's what we need from everybody. I want you right now in the chat button, all right, in chat, to go ahead and type in, what is the best blank for me, but make it for your business. So if you had to create a self-selection tool for your website right now, a choice that would walk somebody through so as to be able to make that choice, you start right here. Now try to be very specific. And so write the complete sentence even if you can. So Karthik, you said proposal, good start. So make it a sentence, and what type of proposal are you talking about? Usually there's an additional word that we need to add, right? And yes, so what is the best wealth strategy for me, said Nicole. That's good, Nicole, right? That's good. Now, we might even change that eventually for my family or for my business, whatever that thing is, depending on the specificity of what you offer. All right, David said, what is the best technical solution for me? Now, the issue with that, David, is if everybody else could have used that question, then it's not specific enough yet, right? So in other words, David, I could also say, as an owner of an agency, what's the best technical solution for me? But it's not clarifying. So try to be a little bit more specific to that. You're on the right track. All right, you're on the right track. What is the best manufacturing software for me? Kristen, really perfect. That was great. All right. What is the best fintech software integration for me? I like it because it's very specific, and apparently that's what you sell. tout them. So I like where you're going with that. So Karthik came back. What is the best bank communication structure for me? Karthik, that I love, because that's extremely specific to the service offering that you have. That's clearly on track, right? Clearly on track. What is the best sewing thread that fits most of my customers for me? That's right, Jose. So if you're selling, if you're like a wholesaler, whatever that thing is of sewing thread, and they're asking you this question often, or at least of your sales team, anybody that's in that process for you, this will clarify that. In a perfect world, gang, in a perfect world, they are coming to us and they're saying things like, yeah, Marcus, I already know what shape of the shape and size pool I want because I did that little application on your site. And so now we just need to figure out what accessories we need, right? That's ideal because they, through their own doings, push themselves down the funnel. I'm telling you, these tools are going to be huge, huge. These experiences for creating a seller-free sales experience as time goes on. Andy, did you have a thought for how you would apply this?
Yeah. So I think we run in two different areas, right? So many times the question is always about, who is the best coach for me? But what
Good.
what they neglect is what is the best operational methodology and tying that to an actual coach.
Yeah.
So we've got to figure out how to tie both of those things together. I think there's a series of questions that come along with it. There's some tactical questions around number of employees, like size of business, location, those kind of general questions. But then we want to pretty quickly, we would do this in a sales call or, just what we call discovery call.
Yep.
We want to understand, where's your frustration?
Yep.
So is there frustration in your business today? And if you're the business owner and you don't have frustration, that means you're not scaling or you don't want to scale. That's going to create.
So the question then, Andy, and this is like what the experiment that I would recommend that you consider is, could you replicate that discovery call, or at least part of it, on the website in some way? One other example that I thought of is as simple as, is scaling up right for my business?
Yeah.
Because as you know, it's not necessarily right for everybody, because sometimes people aren't in the right headspace to actually do it, or there's other signals that make it not the right time. And so that's another perfect example. And it shows that you're not biased, because the moment you say, is scaling up really right for my business, and you literally at times recommend to people that they don't take that route, then that shows that you're very different than some of the other coaches they may be talking to.
That's awesome.
Everybody that participated in that, you did a good job there. You really caught the vision on that. The best tool I've seen for this, I'm really hot on this tool right now. In fact, recently became a partner of this company. I believe in it so much. They allow you to create your own calculators, quizzes, assessments, recommendations, all these types of tools, right, for self-selection. It's called Outgrow. And so there's a URL, and I believe very, very strongly in this company. You can build these out pretty simply. And so Outgrow, outgrow.co, great company, really excited about them. Okay, so last one I want to show you is self-pricing. Self-pricing, if you get a chance, I talk so much about how to discuss pricing on your website, and they ask you answer. An entire section of the book is written on this. I've had companies like Microsoft hire me to teach their teams how to address this subject of cost and price, whether it's a product or service, B2B, B2C, manufacturer, whatever. So I'm going to give you an example of a self-pricing tool. And I'm going to give you what many people would consider of, oh, I could never do that, because I am a fiberglass swimming pool manufacturer. I have dealers and franchisees all over the country. They set their own prices. So how would I, as a manufacturer, talk about my pricing? Well, let's look at how this would work. So let's say you went to the website right now and you wanted to get a price for your fiberglass swimming pool. I know as a business, I'm a B2B to C. Most companies are actually more B2B to C than they realize. First, I'm selling to a dealer or franchisee, and then I'm selling to the end user, the homeowner, right? And so if most companies started thinking more B2B to C, they'd be dramatically more successful. Most manufacturers don't think this way. It's a crying shame. And many others that potentially would be in that space don't think that way. So getting back to the tool, you go to the website. This is at riverpoolsandspas.com, by the way. So you could try this yourself if you wanted to. And you say, I'm going to build and price my pool. All right. Now, I give you the ability to see the different pool shapes. Notice you can see examples for each one. So once you select a pool shape on that first page, you'd also see what step you're on, and you're going to be able to continue later. Now, this is really important because whenever you're doing any type of self-selection, self-pricing, people want to see their progress. If they cannot see the progress, they'll opt out because they feel like, how long is this going to take? But if they see that they're making progress, that's the feed, right? That's the reward to continue down. Now, once they have filled that out, then or chosen the shape and size of the pool, then we're going to show them. And basically, right now, I want you to realize this is what I would spend if I went into the home. This is the first 20 minutes of most sales conversations. All right. So when I say replicating the sales experience, I really mean it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to explain to them the base package that comes with the pool. Now, I'm not going to assume that they really know anything I'm talking about. So if I say things like I have an advanced fiberglass pool installation or advanced fiberglass pool manufacturing, we're going to make sure that we include those little links that says, what is this? Because otherwise we're going to assume they know things that they don't. That's called the curse of knowledge. Businesses are prolific with it in every single industry. You've all met people like that. And so be careful not to suffer from the curse of knowledge. Assume that they don't necessarily understand what you're saying. As we continue after the base package, now they get to start to choose their options. Do you want brushed concrete? Do you want textured concrete? Do you want pavers? And you're going to be able to see the differences between each one of them. Then you're going to be able to choose the different accessories that you want. Okay, so after you choose the accessories, we're even going to cover with you the potential extras, the traditional hidden costs of any home improvement project. We're actually going to mention them right now. Once you do that, finally, there's the form. You put the form after they go through the journey because by this point, they're very invested and they want that answer. And so we put the form here. This is why this is an unbelievable database lead magnet. I mean, you want to talk about blowing up your database. This will blow up your database when you have tools like this. Okay. I was having, Andy, and I'm not joking, I was having over the summer. Now, COVID elevated a lot of this, but I was getting over 1,000 of these in a weekend, of people filling this out. You want to talk about building your database? That'll do it very, very quickly. And so once they fill out the form, now they get an immediate email. This email is going to have a video because we want to personalize it as much as possible, very virtual, right? And then, and here's where it gets interesting, notice on that same email, notice you see the overall price estimate. Now it's a $15,000 range. And you're like, yeah, but you've only given them a $15,000 range. I've given them more than 99% of all stinking fiberglass pool manufacturers in the world. And that's why people consistently say, I just want to thank you, because finally somebody was willing to talk about that which nobody else talked about. This is how we became, one of the reasons we became the fastest growing fiberglass pool manufacturer in the world by doing stuff like this. And finally, they can schedule, after they receive that, their 20-minute call. That, my friends, is self-pricing. So we've got self-scheduling, self-selection, and self-pricing. They're all going to be huge game changers for your website as you move forward. Now, we're going to do some Q&A. And so start thinking about some questions that you would have. I will say to this, anybody that has a question for me, you can reach out to me personally, marcus@marcussheridan.com. That's my personal email there. It'll come directly to me. Nobody else is going to read that one. So you're welcome to let me know any question that you have. And here's some other questions to think about right now as we get going, okay? What are the mistakes that people make with this? There's plenty of those. I could talk about that, okay? And Andy, you can decide as any other questions come in, but what are the mistakes that people make with this? What are some of the first things that you should be thinking about if you want to do any of the things that we talked about? What are some of the first things that you should be doing, especially if you want to go video and virtual selling? Okay, that's one that we can go with. And so, Andy, do we have any questions, or do you have any questions? Now's the time, gang, to go ahead and bring those in because I'm here and we might as well attack some of the specific ones that you have.
Yeah, we've got a couple of them coming in, and listeners, just put those in the Q&A. If you want to stick them in chat, we'll grab them either place. First of all, I've heard you like in the background talk about this stuff. I've read and watched video snippets, but and this wasn't even all that deep, but you went a lot deeper in this hour than what I've seen in the past. So I appreciate you doing this, and everything is in this book. I've read the book. It's really good. But I think the simplicity of what you have shown us And there's some complexity to putting it all together and getting it right, but the simplicity of it and the idea part of it is just spot on and solid.
And that's the key, right, Andy? Because this isn't complicated in nature. Because if we just, and I meant when I said earlier, if we just say, would I like to have that as a buyer? Would I like to have that experience? Would I like to experience that or do that thing? If the answer is yes, that's the guide. That's the strategy. It's like, okay, so now what do we do about it, right? How do we develop the thing, the tool, the experience, whatever it is? So I'm glad you mentioned that because it is fundamentally simple.
Yeah, very much so. Says, here's a question. Roberto says, do you have a maximum time duration for the first video call with a potential customer?
I don't have a time duration. I will tell you that most salespeople lack incisive skills when they're having conversations, including with video. And an example of what I'm talking about, we find in all the studies that I've done, because I've watched probably at least 150 sales call recordings of different organizations since it started. Let me give you a classic mistake that they make. The small talk is too long at the beginning, and it turns off a CEO, especially if there's too much small talk, and they don't get quickly to the points. If you go quickly to the points, you actually elevate the urgency and the focus in the room on the call. And so this is something that you want to teach your sales team, right? You want to have never more than 90 seconds of small talk, preferably less than 60 seconds to get rocking and rolling, especially if there's leaders on the call and you want to make sure you maintain their respect for you as an authority. I would generally try to keep it less than 45 minutes. And more often than not, it could be less than 30 minutes, but it depends on where they are. Because if somebody, and if you're, especially if you've done the ask you answer, you'll find that some people, the average person for like my swimming pool company, and again, as I say this, folks don't say, well, he's the exception. I'm not the exception. My buyers are just like yours. They want to be informed and they don't want to make mistakes. Our average buyer has viewed over 100 pages of the website before they buy. So our average customer views over 100 pages of our website. Our website now has over 900 pages. You say, how does it not have 900 pages? You read the ask you answer, you figure it out, but there's a lot of questions about pools. We've answered every single one of them in an article or video on the website. Okay, we're the Wikipedia of pools. That's how it happens.
What do you include in your video email? David's asking that.
Yeah, so when you do a video email, there's different ways to do this. Number one, this can be with a regular customer and you're explaining something that would require you to write more than a paragraph of stuff if you were typing it out. All right. That's one way to do it. Another way that you should always do is if you're sending out proposals, and whatever you do with your company, I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't send out proposals, but if you're sending out proposals, you should always have a video of you explaining the proposal. So the proposal on the screen plus you. If you don't do that, what happens? Somebody in the organization explains to the other decision makers the proposal you gave them, and the chances that they screw it up somehow is about 101%. So don't leave it in the hands of others to explain your proposals. Do it always over video. Your face, plus the proposal on the screen. All right. And you can do that with video. You can just show yourself, or you can show yourself plus your screen. Any special occasions or events you want to send out, that happy birthday or that get well, way more personalized, way more powerful. I will say that leaders of organizations should be sending out, if they're making an organizational announcement, and Andy, you're a leader, I'm a leader of an organization. You've seen this before. Sometimes if you send it out as a text email, it can get misconstrued because they didn't get a chance to read it the right way, or it just didn't come across the right way. So we always like to send both video and text, which means it's much more difficult for it to misinterpret. Same thing with the customer in this case. So any communication really that you have, you could do. The only time I don't send a video for the most part, or at least if you're talking about a sales team, is when it's really quick answers. Quick answers, we don't do videos, but otherwise we're doing videos, especially before the call to set the expectations. That's probably arguably the best way to send that one-to-one video beforehand. Good stuff.
Is there detail about that in the book as well? I don't remember.
There is. In fact, I've got a new book too out that's got a ton on that called The Visual Sale. It's all about video and building a culture of video in your organization. And if you go to thevisualsale.com, and Leah, you can type that in for me if you would. It's on Amazon right now. It came out 2 weeks ago, and the book's doing great. But if you're looking to just become world class with video, virtual selling talks all about that in that book. So it's there. They Ask You Answer has it, right? They Ask You Answer is massive on the content strategy.
Yeah.
And then I did a book just on video and video sales that just came out.
All right. So we'll grab that too. Is there an ideal, this is from Jose. So is there an ideal time for a Zoom meeting with a new customer to introduce them to the business? Is it?
Yeah, same. I would just say, as long as it takes without waste. And if you teach your sales team to talk incisively, and that might sound obvious, Andy, you know how unobvious that is for so many communicators. All right, what makes a Petra coach great is it's like they might not know more than others, they just say it in a more incisive way than others say it. Thus, they get there in a straight line versus that squiggly line that it takes so many people to get to the point with. And so it's the same thing with your sales calls. There can't be waste. If you have no waste and it's 30 minutes, that's fine. If you have no waste in 20 minutes, it's fine. I would say though, it shouldn't, in most cases, go more than 45 minutes.
But there's not a time of the day.
Not a set. Oh, time of day. No, in time of day, there's definitely not a time of day. I've not found any correlation. Because like with my pool company, we do it at night, right? Yeah. And so it's just, there's not a correlation. I would say though that you want to have as many decision makers there as you can, right? And so do what you can to have all those that are going to be a part of the decision there.
Yeah, and we always used to say, who in addition to you would be on the team?
Absolutely. Who in addition to you is the key. You don't want to assume that they're not the person.
Correct. Outgrow, can that be plugged into WordPress? I have to assume yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And then based on all the feedback of the focus of making customers interact with on their own with our website, do you personally recommend investing on redoing our website to make the experience of the customers more attractive and interactive, making them feel that they have the power of the
Yeah, and this is why, and it's going to sound self-serving, but that person absolutely needs to start with that book, They Ask You Answer. There's a whole section on creating the ultimate website that is obsessed with the way buyers think, what it should include. There's certain parts that should be there every time, everything from your homepage down to what's called a learning center. All right, every website should have a learning center, not just a blog. You should literally have a learning center with a video library, and you have an article library essentially, and then you have in that same learning center, you might have your case studies there. You might have, your webinars, recorded webinars there is examples of things that should be in a learning center. And so you want to have that for your business on your website. Don't necessarily know if you need to blow up your website. I would start saying, okay, let's brainstorm all the questions we consistently get asked by prospects and customers. Do a good job with it, go to your sales team with it, and then ask yourself, how many of these questions are thoroughly answered right now on our website? Chances are less than 20%. That's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, we are right up on top of the time. Looks like the questions have kind of slowed coming in. Again, the book, They Ask You Answer, most of all of this is in the book. Marcus has his email address up here, so you're more than welcome to email him directly and ask any additional questions. And then you're going to be with us on November the 18th to close out the Ascent event, right? So we won't be the exact same information. There'll be some different things, but you're more than welcome to join as a listening audience. Come back to that event for the closing time period. We appreciate you doing that as well, Marcus.
Yeah, my pleasure. This was great. Love the organization, and love working with you, Andy. So I'm glad we could do this today.
All right, brother. I'll see you around. All you listeners, let us know what we can do for you. Recorded, it'll go out probably end of the day, first of tomorrow. You'll get this in an inbox so you can click on it and rewatch it. It went pretty quickly, and there's a lot of great detail in here as well as on the blog. Thanks, Marcus. See you, bud.